Hello, I want to welcome you to this episode of the 10-Minute Teacher. And today, in the ongoing study of theological research and writing, I want to specifically look at the idea of thinking like a researcher. As you pursue your studies, there's no way we can undersell the importance of the need to think. Kate Turabian, in her book, Student's Guide to Writing College Papers, says this: research is above all about having a purpose, about solving problems. Its most important activities happen before and after collecting information, and it depends far more on thinking than on doggedness in the library or lab or even a keyboard, though it does also depend on that. Now, the reason this is so important is because the research has shown that the ability to use critical thinking and apply it to our research and writing is on a serious decline in our education. There's a great book called Academically Adrift that has done extensive study and surveying in this area. And here's what they conclude is that the majority of college students of all levels, that's undergraduate and graduate, exhibit significant difficulties that range across nearly every aspect of the research process. Some of those problems include the overuse of Google and Wikipedia, that students are unaware of how to search scholarly databases, that they're unaware of good search logic, and they could not find good resources for their writing. These are serious problems. Their study goes on to say this: in the first 2 years of college, with a large sample of more than 2,300 students, we observed no statistically significant gains in critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing skills for at least 45% of students in our study. I mean, these are students that span from Ivy League to community college. There's no demographic that says one is better than the other. What we say is that across the board, our colleges are failing to help students think critically and apply complex reasoning to their writing. They go on to say this: overall, though, the study found that there has been a 50% decline in the number of hours a student spends studying and preparing for class from several decades ago. In other words, how much work students put in is on a serious decline, partly because of maybe the students' work ethic, but also maybe the way in part we've structured our classes, that we've lowered the bar and our expectations for students. And I've seen this in my classes. I know it's very challenging to elevate and raise student coursework up to the level we're supposed to be at, whether that's an undergraduate or graduate. And so our schools have failed us in this area, and that's a serious problem for writing. So that's where I want to go next. Helping you learn how to think is going to be the beginning of your ability to be a good researcher and a good theological writer. Let me illustrate this way. Here you are beginning this process, and you have a goal of writing for something, whether it be a paper, whether it be for work, your job requires certain documents that you produce. It could be a job application itself, or it could be for a Bible study. There's any amount of documents that you need to produce in your life for a variety of purposes. And all along, you have this input coming in. You have data and information, all these sources feeding stuff into your brain. Well, how do you take that input and produce something that's useful? So what is the process? That process is thinking. Thinking is how we get from all this input to something that is usable. And so in this next slide, let me illustrate to you this thinking process. First, really, that process begins with brainstorming. Then it goes to analysis, organization, interpretation, critique, conclusion, and questions. And this whole process is really cyclical. You begin with data information, you brainstorm that stuff, then you analyze, you organize, you interpret that, you give a critique of that. Again, offer conclusion, question. Go back through the process again and again. This whole process will help you produce quality materials. So if you're wondering, where do I begin with this? Well, let me help you with just the brainstorming side by this little tiny exercise on clustering, or sometimes people call it webbing. What you do is begin by putting a word you'd like to explore in the center of a piece of paper. Put a circle around it. So the word could be love. The word could be on any specific topic you want to study. And then as fast as you can in 10 minutes, do a free association. Write down anywhere on a page as many words as you can think of associated with that word in the center of the page. If you get stuck somewhere, just go back to the center word and start all over again. Speed is the key here because you want to get as many words on that page as you can. Don't discount any word or phrase that comes to you. Just put it on the page. So begin practicing that. Do that. It's a good idea, a good way to begin brainstorming. And you can actually do this with a group of friends, do whatever, and kind of encourage each other and help each other look over each other's work and think through what you've actually written down. So after you do this exercise, let me just say this. It's important that you plan to write. If you want to write well, you have to have a good plan. And that plan has to include working through that entire thinking process. As you do your research and study, don't just try to convey facts that you found interesting. Your goal as a good researcher and theological writer is to gather information, to interpret that information, and to apply that data to answer a specific research question that you have determined is the goal of your paper. And we'll work in another video on how to determine that research question. But for now, just keep that goal in mind, is you're not just trying to give raw information or facts, you're trying to eventually apply that information to a very specific question and answer that for your reader. Here's a few other writing hints as you begin this process. Kate Turabian tells us the best researchers try to do more than just convince others that their answer is sound. They also show why that answer is worth knowing by showing why their question is worth asking in the first place. So in other words, it doesn't do anybody any good if you just say, hey, here's some important information for you to know, or here's a really good answer, or here's a really good research topic or paper, and they might say, well, that's well written. But really, the reader needs to know, why is this important? Why do I need to read this paper to begin with? So to help you that, remember that your writing project is really a conversation with the reader. What questions does the reader have? If you've picked a good topic, you know it's a good topic because maybe friends in your circle around you, family members, people you know, have these same questions. So if they approach this topic that you're researching, what questions would your friends have? Matter of fact, that's a great way to do this. Take your topic that you're going to research and ask some friends, what do you think about this? What questions would you have if you were trying to answer this question? And then you begin to understand the question a reader might have. And then you ask yourself, how can my research help this person answer those very specific questions? So finally, let me address one other important thing, is that how do you increase your output? All of us are on a deadline. We've all got to read, research, and write and produce something quality on a specific deadline. So how do you get all of this work done in a shorter amount of time? Well, here are 7 steps that I think could help you. First, find out your best writing time. Some people are better in the morning, afternoon, evening, whenever it is. What's your best time? And then you've got to minimize interruptions. Turn off the phone, do whatever you have to do. Make sure you can focus. Step number 3 is to cut out distractions. Okay, interruptions are different. Interruptions are people that could find you and interrupt you or call you. Distractions are things like email, the internet, things that will sidetrack your mind. There might be time when you want to take regular breaks, but don't let that be an interruption or a distraction in the midst of doing your writing. Write a simple outline is step 4. You need to just take what you're doing, very simple outline, to help guide your thinking process. Step number 5 is kind of unusual for some people, but it can help. Set a timer. Write under pressure. I know that in my experience in college, one of the greatest skills I ended up learning was how to perform in a time crunch. How to do it like, hey, I've got a paper due tomorrow. I've got to write this. Bam, I'm going to crank it out. What I found over time is that I perform better under pressure. So guess what? You need to create pressure for yourself. You can't say, oh, this thing's due in 2 weeks. I've got plenty of time. You got to say, okay, I've got an hour. Set the timer. Go. How much can you get done? Put yourself under the gun. Step number 6 is really just start wherever with what comes easy. If you've got the outline, start anywhere you want. Start in the middle, start at the beginning, start at the end. Start wherever your mind is focused at that moment. Because whatever you have in there, you can just put down on paper. Once it's there, you can move on to another section. Later on, you'll learn to be more logical and systematic in how you process what you've done. But at the beginning, start wherever your head is at, and you'll find the writing process is much easier. Seventh and finally, don't edit while you write. This is hard for a lot of people. This is probably my most difficult thing, is because I like to edit and re-edit and read while I do it. It's hard for me to put down something that I think is unfinished. But you will do better if you can just simply produce a lot and then go back later and edit. So, for example, if you want to set your timer for an hour, say, I'm going to write for an hour, and then after that, say, okay, I've got another timer for the next 30 minutes. I'm going to re-edit what I have. So that might be a process for you. That kind of works for me sometimes. If I say this is my writing time versus my editing time, then my mind is sort of freed up to know that, okay, I can fix that later, and I don't get all anal about going and fixing my mistakes as I see them. All right, that's it for this video. Maybe now's a good time to go find a library, sit down, and begin working through this thinking process. Enjoy your writing.